And if we go on to our first presentation from Alexandra, talking about the Newcastle archives. Are you okay to start?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. So yeah, I'm an archivist here at Newcastle University Special Collections and Archives, which is where we collect, manage and facilitate access to the unique, distinctive rare book and archive collections here at Newcastle University. And our collection strengths reflect the research interests of the university, so things like medical and political history, children's literature, contemporary literature, and they range from kind of medieval manuscripts to early 2000s campaign material from local LGBTQ+ organisations, Victorian children's picture books about the coal industry, to diaries recording Britain's involvement in the establishment of the Kingdom of Iraq. So just hugely varied and very well used. And we've got a few interlinking projects going on here which involve IIIF, and they all kind of step on each other in different places. So I've tried to kind of do this in a linear way that makes sense, but because everything's so interlinked, it gets a bit sort of knotty. So I'm hoping it will make sense to people outside of Newcastle who aren't involved in all the projects. But we first became interested in IIIF when it was kind of touted to us as a unique selling point for a digital asset management system that we procured back in, I think, about 2016, maybe a bit later. So I'm going to start sharing my browser. I haven't done slides. I'm just going to show you the different websites and tools that I'm talking about as I go through. So collections captured is the front end on Content DM, which is the digital asset management system we use for our online image library. So this is where we've got copies of the items in our collections available for people to browse. And we were really interested in IIIF as giving us the potential for simple reuse of images across all of our different digital platforms from a single point of truth. So having the metadata and the image here in our digital asset management system, and then being able to reuse that in a simple way across all of our other platforms without duplicating the content itself. A bit of a disclaimer in that the nitty-gritty of our work with IIIF is done by our incredible digital library services team, who sadly couldn't make it today. So yeah, I will occasionally refer to the work that they've done. But once we'd got Content DM, we started kind of exploring all the different potential uses and methods for how we could deploy it across our existing platforms. And our first successful implementation was on, I just need to move my Zoom controls, there we go, was on our browse pages. So this is on our main web pages. It's just a website that gives an overview of all the different collections that we have. And these used to have static thumbnails on each page, but now if you open one of the pages, you'll see that there is a little IIIF viewer that's pulled from Content DM that contains content with the metadata or minimal metadata pulled across. And this is a customized version of the Mirador viewer, which Scott from our DLS team created for us. So that was our first kind of win. We were very happy when we got that functioning. So another big target for us was to find a way to create a kind of like-for-like replacement for this platform, which is Turning the Pages, which is a platform that we still pay a subscription to. But we never paid for a great deal of customization on it. We paid for a little bit when we first got it, and we were kind of aware that as a platform it had the potential to do a huge amount of things, but found that doing that was quite expensive. So we kind of backed away from it a bit, and we have got a lot of content on here that you can look through. This is a lovely one, this 14th century musical manuscript. And it is a nice thing and it does get a lot of use, but we were aware that, well, we're paying for this platform, and actually in IIIF we could potentially build our own viewer that we could share on our web pages, like for like, have a bit more control over the way that it looks, a little bit more control over the metadata that's used, and be able to embed it in things a little bit more smoothly. So we felt that IIIF had the capacity for sufficient similar features to offer like-for-like functionality or even an improvement. And we're still working on that. We're really close to having it ready. Sadly, not quite there, so I can't show it to you just yet. We had a really knotty issue with ensuring that page level metadata was carried across in the manifest from Content DM, but Matt Check, who's on our digital library services team, has sorted that out, which is brilliant. And now we're kind of on the last stages of how it's going to look and exactly how we're planning on using it. So those are two strands of our work with it, and we're a bit further along with those two than the other ones. Another one involves our new collections management system. So collections management system, think of it a bit like a library catalogue. It's a portal for searching and finding the material in our archives. So we're currently moving, and we didn't have our own collection management system, and we recently procured one, which is Atom by Artifactual, which is an open source platform. And we started implementing it in early 2020, as everyone knows, the worst time to start on a large project. So as a result, we still haven't quite launched it yet. But this is a sneaky preview of the back end, but we will be launching end of January. It has been populated with data. We've still got a bit of cleaning to do and work on the user interface. But one of the next strands to this, so it won't be ready for launch, but it will be ready hopefully by the end of 2023, is to embed IIIF within the listings themselves. So the idea is that eventually Atom will replace these browse pages here. So the one that I showed you at the beginning, rather than having a website with all of this content hosted, there will be kind of on the front page of the Atom system, there will be IIIF tiles essentially that share the same information from within one system, but is a bit more responsive, I guess. But the idea to implement IIIF in here, as well as being driven by our increased understanding of it, there was also another project, so an additional project that's going on alongside this, which is the revamp of our Gertrude Bell research website. So Gertrude Bell was an archaeologist and diplomat. She was an expert in the Middle East. She helped define the borders of Iraq in the 1920s. She was anti-suffrage. She's the subject of a couple of films. She's quite controversial. But her archive of letters, diaries, and photographs is held here at Newcastle and is inscribed on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register. So this is the existing website. We've had a website for it for quite a long time, but you can see it's very static. It's not very interactive. The search features are limited. We don't have images of the content alongside the transcripts. It's quite dated now. It still does a really good job. It's heavily used by an international audience. It absolutely swamps the statistics for anything else that we put out there because it's incredibly popular. So to drive this website, we need to have the collection metadata and the IIIF manifest ideally in a single place so that we can then pull that into the new website from a single point. That's ideally what we're aiming for. And that's what we're hoping to use Atom for. But we've got quite a lot of challenges with this. We're yet to find anyone who's completed a similar piece of work. And I would absolutely love to hear from anyone who has, but we've talked to quite a few different organizations now, and there's a lot of people interested in this work. There's a lot of people contacting Artifactual and asking if there's plans to make that functionality a standard feature of Atom. But I'm aware now that people are looking to us to see what we do. So I think there's a bit of a circular. Everyone's kind of looking to see what everybody else is doing. We've got questions around how it's going to display, exactly what the functionality will be behind it. Will it be embedding a customized viewer? Probably. Our previous work with IIIF has involved the digital team customizing Mirador, as I mentioned, and certainly that's going to be an angle that we explore this from. Another very archival thing is whereabouts in the description do we put the manifest? Does it go in this field? You know, archives have quite strict standards about where information goes. And we had a bit of a backwards and forwards, and it was that conversation that kind of led me to talking to Alison about things and some of the bigger conversations. So yeah, still a lot of questions around that. I will give you a super sneak preview of the new Gertrude Bell website. It's not actually even a website. This is a screenshot that I had someone from DLS sent me because I think it's just a mock-up of what they hope it will look like. I think that's going to launch summer is the goal, and it's going to be great. And we're going to have a separate section on it where we have transcripts alongside IIIF images that are enhanced with TEI, so text encoding, so it will be a much richer experience for the user to kind of demonstrate different ways of presenting information over time. So keep an eye out for that. But moving forwards, we are hoping to fully integrate IIIF into our Atom catalogue sometime next calendar year. And we would like to shift Content DM, so what is currently collections captured is the front end. We would like to eventually use Content DM just as a back-end digital asset management system, so getting rid of this front portal and just using Atom as the front portal and the access point to things. We're also looking at how we might be able to use IIIF enhanced collection level descriptions to replace the existing web content on our browse pages, as I mentioned. But we're also starting to look at how we use IIIF in things like our teaching, so embedding the viewer into Canvas, which is our online learning platform, but also how we can use it to support academics as well, who are obviously one of our main stakeholder groups, to help them understand how IIIF manifests can be used to enrich their interaction with our digital content. I did a demonstration to some academics the other day where I just took the manifest from Collections Capture, dropped it into the Universal Viewer, and they were so impressed. And it's kind of like, okay, well, what do we then do with that? Like, that's great. You think it's excellent. How do we use it in a way that's going to benefit your research or your teaching? And how do we streamline what we're doing to make it work for them? So that's me. I think I shall stop sharing my screen. There we go.
That's great, thanks. I have a few questions, but any questions? Yeah, feel free to kind of put your hand up or put it in the chat. Great presentation, thank you. It's great to see what you're doing.
You're welcome.
Is there a large Atom presence in the UK?
There's a few people, so we've teamed up with key organizations that we know have kind of completed their implementation of it. We did a lot of liaison with the University of York, who've went through a big process of implementing, and I think launched shortly before we started on the process. We did a lot of benchmarking when we were procuring a system and trying to decide what to do. Certainly the main Atom user group seems to be North America rather than here, but we felt that it was the right system for us. I know that we were warned very much by York that it was free, but free like a box of frogs. You know, and certainly there's been a huge amount of input from our DLS team, which has been for our team in special collections quite a new way of working for us. Yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a good journey. I think we ended up securing funding for a project post within the DLS team because we kind of realized that that was the support that we needed to push this project through, was somebody dedicated with those skills to have the time to spend on this project, getting us to those final stages.
Great, thanks. Joe, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I could probably ask you a number of questions. I was just going to keep it to two. In relation to what you've just said there about that extra post, sharing details of how well that's worked in your institution could be quite beneficial for other institutions.
Yeah,
I think for the National Gallery, we have a number of discussions about what skill sets are in which departments. And we also felt that having a post within our IT department that dealt with non-Microsoft software, open source software, sort of ensuring that cultural heritage institutions can maximize the benefit of so many open source systems that are out there, but they do need handholding, they do need help. So more details on that as you've completed could be extremely useful.
Yeah, we're really lucky in the library because a few years ago, all of the university's IT was centralized, and we did used to have some dedicated IT chaps who worked down the corridor, and they were brilliant. And if you needed something, you went to see Richard and it was great. And they got sucked into the main consolidated IT. But we have our digital library services team who are very ring fenced. They're different. They work with the library systems. They do, and our university librarian has been really good at maintaining that and keeping that.
Very sensible.
I think if it was someone in central IT, we'd never have gotten a post there.
Yeah. The other question I had is you mentioned something about wanting to get your object information and your IIIF manifests from one place. I was wondering how much object information were you going to put into your IIIF manifests and thus just have one thing to pull in the first place?
See, this is the question. This is an interesting one because obviously the manifests have got the metadata for the digital asset, whereas the collection listing has the official ISAG collection metadata, and there's sometimes very little variation between those, sometimes quite a lot of variation between those. A lot of the decisions that we're making at the moment are kind of being driven by that Gertrude Bell project, which is a very specific project where the manifests are going to have the transcript information and are going to be very heavy on that rather than collection information. I think.
Yeah.
I say this as somebody who's not sitting on that project group. I need to bang on the wall and ask Valentina what the decisions are there. So yeah, there are still questions around which data we want from where, if that makes sense, because ideally I know that DLS want it all pulled from one system, which would be ideal, but at the moment we're working across two. So yeah.
It might be useful for you to explore the sort of custom metadata options you can do, and also the idea that you can have metadata about the manifest and then metadata about the individual images or the canvases in the manifest. So you might want to explore where you can take that, because if you can get everything in the manifest, you can then play, I can't remember what the version was, Glenn, the new search API. And it might give you a lot more flexibility with your user interface situation because you're only dealing with one thing.
That's interesting.
So I would explore it. It might not work because it might not allow you to do what you want to do, but you can put a lot of metadata into controlled places within manifests if you try. So if that works with your system, that might make it easier for you for the development of your user interface end, because you're just dealing with one source of data.
That's interesting. Thank you, Joseph. I will pass that on.
Sorry, we're just got to move on to the next presentation now. And Claire's just messaged me and said this is why it's so useful to have these UK meetups, and hopefully we can do more of them. So if you want to carry on continuing in the chat, please do. And Claire's asked a question in chat, which
I'll hop in chat and try and ping some answers off in there.
Thank you. So we're going to move on now to talk about the RL UK Professional Practice Fellowship, which is an opportunity available to all RL UK members. And Alison's been working as a practice fellow to give you more details about it. But we're going to start with Claire with an introduction to the RL UK fellowship programme.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Glenn, for inviting me, and huge thanks to Alexandra. That was really interesting, and I'm going to be in touch. Please tell us more. So huge thanks. And now I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Yeah, I'm not in my office, I was saying earlier, because there's a leak in my roof. So let's see if this works. Oh, so it doesn't seem to be liking me sharing my screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the slides, and then I'm going to share the slides with you because they've got loads of links in. But my job here is very much to introduce Alison and say a bit more about the RL UK AHRC fellowship screen that Alison is taking part of. So I have numerous hats. I am one of the co-chairs of the IIIF outreach group, and my day job here at the University of Leeds is I'm Associate Library Director for Research and Digital Futures, but I'm also a member of the RL UK Digital Shift Working Group. And I'm here today in that stead for William Nixon, who unfortunately can't join us. He is currently in the process of finishing up at the University of Glasgow and joining RL UK as the Deputy Director. But his current role, yeah, we've all got money hats, haven't we, is also of chair as the RL UK Digital Shift Working Group. So a bit about the Digital Shift Working Group. So it is been formed for a number of years, and Torsten Reimer, who many of you know, who's now at the University of Chicago, was its initial chair. And it's got four main areas. So it's looking across Research Libraries UK at skills, at scholarship, spaces, and stakeholders. And as part of that work, they looked at with AHRC creating a professional practice. And they did some work in the background, the scoping study, and this launched September 2021. And it is for academic and research libraries, and it's not just for RL UK members. It's open more widely than RL UK members, so please bear that in mind. Initially, it looked for 5 fellowships of up to £20,000, and that's about 80% of full economic costing. And in the end, it funded 10, which just shows like the huge breadth and depth of applications that we got through. So the summer this year, and for 6 to 12 months, the fellowship started, looking at how to set research agendas, be active for library colleagues to be active participants, leaders of multidisciplinary research, and provide intellectual leadership, of which Alison's going to share more. This is a true partnership between Research Libraries UK and AHRC, and was launched as such with our 10 fellows. And there's information on the RI UK website about what they're doing, the 10 different areas, which span the whole areas of academic libraries. And huge thanks to Alison. I'm really looking forward to hearing more. So I will mosey on so you can hear from Alison about what she's been doing. And she is based at the University of Cardiff, but I'll leave her to tell you more about her work. So if you think, oh, well, I didn't go for it last year, or what's about more? Well, we have our second round of AHRC RI UK Fellows, which has been launched. And I'll post links in the chat to where you can find out more. It closes early in the new year on the 13th of January. We are looking for 12 fellows of up to £25,000. So that's to cover up to 80% of staff time. And very much want again to open it up to a wide range of applications. It is not just for Research Library UK members. And as I said, I'll post the link to more information, and I'll post these slides as well. There's a link to them in the Google Drive, so I'll post that link for you all. So thank you, and sorry that my tech's not working today. Oh, can you see it now? Oh, were you sharing them, Glenn? Sorry.
Yeah, I was trying to. I'm not sure I was in time with your talking, but yeah, so they are available on the slides.
Yeah, I should have done my Chris Whitting next slide, please, shouldn't I? Thank you. And over to you, Alison.
Oh, thank you, Claire. What a lovely introduction. I'm going to share my PowerPoint now. Hopefully this will work. Just switch that round. Does that look okay? Okay. So as Claire was telling you, I submitted an application this time last year to the RL UK Professional Practice Fellowship Scheme. At that time, it was a completely new initiative, so I hadn't run before, and I had no idea what type of project was likely to be accepted and what sort of thing they were looking for. In the guidance, the scope of the call, it was very broad, very vague, which is quite exciting really in one sense, because there was a completely blank canvas to work from. But it was also quite challenging as well, because when I've worked on heritage grant applications in my job as an archivist, the requirements are always very stringent, and you kind of they have to be your starting point. You have to design your project in order to meet those requirements. But with this fellowship scheme, the brief was wide open, and it really forced me to think about what did I want to do. So, in a dream scenario where I could just conjure up somebody who would just deal with my job for 9 months, what would I want to spend that time doing? And that is just such a luxury to think about. And I would really encourage anyone who's thinking about applying for this scheme to just take part in that just thought experiment, just go wild and think about what would you really want to do if you had free time to do it, because you're likely then to end up with an idea that's kind of meets only one of the criteria that's specified, really, that it's something that is a logical progression of skills and interests and passions that you already have. And so if it comes organically out of something you think you really want to do, I think you will demonstrate that case, and you'll end up with a project that you're genuinely excited about and is going to keep you motivated through a period of working alone, which is something that a lot of us in the field of libraries and in museums and archives don't often do. We're used to working in teams, and research is as a solo activity. So it has to be something that's going to kind of keep you moving forwards. And so well, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking at potential solutions to a current lack of library support for digital research outputs in the humanities, looking specifically at digital archives and online exhibitions, which is something that we're asked to help for support for, and it is currently very difficult to provide. And my interest in this area came about because I have quite extensive personal experience of trying to deliver digital projects without having any internal infrastructure. It's a problem that's sort of specific to Cardiff over the last few years. I had spent most of 2020 when we were plunged into lockdown exploring free and third-party solutions for digital access to our special collections, such as the Internet Archive. When lockdown happened, we had decommissioned one digital repository and we were about to go out to tender for a new one, but then, you know, funds were reassigned in the chaos of, you know, trying to respond to this kind of global emergency. And we had no digital repository, and this urgent need to host content online to support the new, you know, research and remote teaching and research that had to be carried out. And academics at Cardiff who have an interest in creating digital archives and online exhibitions, they have been in the same boat for many years, and they have been forced over time to rely on free and third-party platforms to host their research outputs. These are things that get submitted for ref, and they are ending up on platforms like Instagram and WordPress and Weebly because they have no support, because they have no other option for places to make this content available. And I've always been quite concerned by the sustainability of these platforms. You know, as we've seen recently, a lot of uncertainty surrounding, say, Twitter, for instance. You can never really be certain that third-party platforms are going to offer you reliable long-term hosting or support. So 2021, then sort of, you know, towards the end then of the pandemic, Cardiff University Library invested in Alma Digital from Ex Libris. So this is an internal repository to support the display of digitized content that supports IIIF. And the motivation to support IIIF really came largely in response to my growing involvement in the IIIF community from the days of lockdown onwards. I had been able to attend the 2020 conference for free because of the shift to online, and then to get a place on Glenn's 5-day training. And really everything that I learned in that fortnight was a complete game changer for me. Glenn's training used the Internet Archive and also used GitHub and GitHub Pages as these free tools to get started with IIIF in a really accessible way without having any internal infrastructure. And that just sort of kick-started my imagination and my inspiration with all this, really. It allowed me to actually make things, even though we had no support for IIIF yet at Cardiff. So I just played around a lot, really. I made a lot of example manifests and some little guided viewing demos with things like stories and exhibit that I'd learned about at the conference. And I just showed them to anyone who was passing, who had the sort of slightest amount of interest in what I was doing. And my managers just got on board. They could actually see the potential of this. And we all ended up working together on a business case to adopt Alma Digital, really purely based on its support for IIIF. And so my fellowship really is designed to address the next logical step for this, interrogating the capacity of Alma Digital to support the construction of digital archives and online exhibitions to tackle this problem that we've had now for a number of years. And just asking, what are the needs of researchers? To what extent can this new repository meet them? What are its features and limitations? What other tools is it going to integrate with? And, you know, this kind of systematic testing and research and cumulative skill development in this area, it would have been really difficult to undertake without, you know, trying to balance my substantive role in the background as well. So this fellowship has really made space for this work to take place. And I mentioned that the fellowship brief was very loose, but these 3 words were used in the brief, and I think they're appearing again in the new call as well. So I tried to use them to structure my proposal. So at a local level, I propose to build research capacity by establishing what the library can offer or what it would need to offer in order to support researchers in publishing digital archives and exhibitions using Alma Digital or other IIIF tools. And then more broadly, proposing to build digital capability by developing a range of open access training materials aimed at both internal and external audiences to encourage more confident engagement with the digital humanities. And these resources are going to be free and non-reliant on proprietary learning environments, which I think is really important in a HE context. Which is going to allow reuse and adaptation by anyone, regardless of their local infrastructure, to support their self-development and their teaching and research. And when I was showing my experiments and my little IIIF examples and demos to colleagues in the library and academic schools, you know, as Alexandra mentioned as well, there is just so much enthusiasm for them. And I kept being asked, how could they learn more about it? And that usually ended up with me responding along the lines of, it's complicated, and just wishing that I had more time to think about the best way to communicate the jumble of information and sort of useful links that I'd seen sort of in my head. So that experience was the inspiration for this approach, to try and kind of formalize and document this in a more organized way. So yeah, I kicked off this work in August, and as with the best laid plan, some aspects of it have had to be adapted in response to some unexpected findings. So in the very first days of my fellowship, I was trying to embed our image viewer in my brand new blog, and I discovered this problem that Ex Libris, a few days prior to me starting the fellowship, had updated to version 3 of the IIIF presentation API, and it kind of caused an issue that affects the ability of images to be shared beyond the repository. So this is a screenshot from my blog showing how our digital objects are no longer embedding in other resources in the way we expect them to. And this obviously has huge implications for what I'd been hoping to achieve, because this was really the functionality that I was wanting to leverage in order to deliver some of the project outcomes. So basically, I've been unable to test the limits of Armour Digital's interaction with other tools, simply because as things stand, it doesn't actually interact with any external tool as it's intended to. So I've gone on a slightly different journey. I've made a request to Ex Libris for support, obviously, in the first instance, and that was put in a queue back in August. And just kind of spent the first couple of months just trying to test and trying to find and diagnose exactly what was happening. I was communicating the results of those tests back to the support desk call, developing and documenting short-term workarounds to allow some of our more time-sensitive projects to be delivered, despite this problem, and just carrying out extensive liaison with relevant technical communities, including the IIIF community, to seek wider expertise. So something that's helped this process a lot was setting up this blog, which I used to document all my testing process and just thoughts as I'm working through the fellowship. And it's made using a static site generator called Jekyll. And so this is something I'd heard a lot about through the IIIF community, and I'd never actually had the time to explore it. So I was able to use some of the fellowship time to learn how to use it. And it is a really exciting tool in that it allows anyone to set up a simple website or a blog for free without any branding or advertising, and have complete freedom over the design, which, as someone who's trying to learn a bit of web development, is an exciting place to try things out. You've got no restrictive or proprietary templates that you have to work around, and there's no sort of extras that you can only get access to by paying. And also found that having control over the content means that it's been an ideal sandbox in order to test and to demonstrate the results of testing to people in the IIIF and universal viewer communities who've been trying to help me diagnose the problem with this update. The Jekyll blog is hosted on GitHub, and that means that people can not only see my blog posts, but they can see the working code behind the post too. That's obviously making it much easier to see what's happening behind the scenes, and also possible to sort of make use of that inspect function in Chrome as well, to sort of see what's happening live in the browser when these objects are being blocked. So it's a really great sandbox for that. So in terms of this particular issue, the problem is still ongoing. I gave a paper at Ex Libris's international conference in September where I was kind of required to explain that I couldn't actually demonstrate the functionality that I'd pitched in my application because of this issue. I had to use some examples, I think, from University of St Andrews, who are using Universal Viewer, but not Armour Digital. So I was able to sort of say, this is what it would look like if it was working, but unfortunately it's not working. And so this did have the effect of escalating the service desk call in priority, and it prompted a meeting with the service owner as well, which was quite helpful. But as things stand, I am still waiting on a fix to this. Ex Libris don't seem to be still quite able to understand what the problem is, but we're slowly moving forward. I have developed some workarounds, as I said, but they're quite clunky and they're not really suitable as a long-term solution. So this has been quite negative so far, but I do think that taking a step back, I think that identifying this issue, which is actually affecting all their customers worldwide, that has proved to be of equal significance as the research I sort of intended to carry out, because it's sort of potentially more impactful in terms of communicating the importance of IIIF to Ex Libris, who are a major provider. They seem to have until now been focusing on its execution within their own system, and they're obviously not taking into account external interoperability into their development testing. So I think that's been worth highlighting. And it's also brought me into more active engagement with the IIIF community. It's helped to boost my professional profile globally. So I'm now chair of the IIIF Archives Community Group, and this hosts regular open meetings to bring anyone together who is interested in IIIF and archives worldwide. So in the last few meetings, we have had a huge uptake in attendees from the UK. And while I'm here, I will mention that I'm looking for one or more co-chairs for this group as well, if that's something you would like to get involved in. It's not a huge commitment and it does look really good on your CV. So if you are interested in any way, just get in touch if you would like a chat about that. But in terms of other outputs, I have tested integrating Alma Digital with Xerti, which is an internal tool that we use at Cardiff for making learning resources. And so with the workaround that I developed, I've been able to embed objects from Alma Digital into either PowerPoint style interactive tutorials or into a template website like this one. And this site is hosting research that was carried out as part of a student internship in our School of Welsh that otherwise wouldn't have had a home online. And I've also built on my skills with Jekyll to set up another GitHub hosted site using Wax. And Wax is another tool that I heard about via the IIIF community calls, and I've long been quite desperate to play with, to be honest, because it's really exciting. It lets you build free digital archives and exhibitions without any adverts and branding. And it looks a lot slicker than Xerti, than what we've sort of been forced to use so far. People can use it if they don't have access to IIIF infrastructure. This is really exciting. It will take standard images. It will just take JPEGs from you and deliver them for you as IIIF compliant objects. And so I've been documenting my methods and my learning process on the blog, and this is all going to sort of form the basis of a future tutorial for others to follow. And I'm also then looking forward to playing with Joe's simple site generator as well, which works on similar principles to Jekyll and Wax. You can hear a bit about that in his presentation. And in terms of embedding some of the things I'm learning into teaching, I've designed and delivered new lectures on digitization and digital archives for all postgraduate students in the School of History, and those have been authorized now as a mandatory research method session for future years. So this is starting to build bridges now between library provision and what's happening in the academic schools. And I've also been asked to research and write training materials for that would be suitable for an introduction to digital humanities for delivery to students in the School of English in the next academic year, which is again something I'd wanted to see for a long time. I had an unexpected project outcome, which was a trip to Wyoming back in August with my mentor, Professor Julia Thomas, and this was with funding from a separate project grant of hers. She felt that the fellowship dovetailed well with her research trip to project partners in Wyoming's special collections and their English department. And she asked me to join her over there to exchange practices and ideas related to digital humanities training and online exhibitions and digitization workflows and digital platforms, which is a fantastic experience and an opportunity to share ideas. So my next steps will be to continue to lobby for a fix, and also then to use Wax a little bit more to create a fully functioning digital archive and exhibition, to review available online exhibition platforms that are out there. This is something I get asked about a lot. To prepare some digital humanities training materials, again, that's suitable for just like really basic introductory level, and to continue to document all this progress via the blog. So yeah, there is still lots more to come. And if anyone is interested in thinking about making an application for a fellowship, if you're looking at it over the Christmas period, I would be very happy to be contacted. And if you have any questions at all about the process, and my email is just there, so you can contact me or ask me any questions that you have now.
Thanks so much. It's really great. And I think I misspoke. So the fellowship's open to non-RA UK members as well. Is that right, Claire and Alison?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
That's great.
That's great news. So there's a question from Alexandra in the chat. We'd be really interested to hear more about those teaching sessions. Our School of History currently are revamping their postgraduate research skills program. Would be great to get the digital archives and digitization in there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to find somewhere to share that content. We'd love to just make that accessible so that there's just as a curriculum level that stuff is there.
Yeah, well done. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great presentation. Thank you. Running a little short on time, so if you can say any other questions, Alison or Claire, please put them in chat. I'm going to move on to Joe to talk about the final report for the practical applications of IIIF.
Okay, did that work? Sorry, I got a bit of a cough today. Hi, my name is Joe Padfield. I'm a research scientist working in the National Gallery in London. And as Glenn said, I'm going to tell you a bit about the outcomes of the practical applications of IIIF as a building block towards digital national collection. Now, this project was funded by UKRI, well, AHRC, as part of a Towards the National Collection programme, which was £18.9 million HRC fund for a 5-year investment in UK's infrastructure and planning for museums, archives and libraries and galleries to develop a potential unified virtual national collection in the future. The funding sort of mainly focused on 8 foundation projects, which are now being completed, our project being one of them, and then a much bigger budget for 5 discovery projects, which are ongoing at the moment. And I recommend people go and explore what they're doing. Some very interesting work being carried out there. Now, the question is that if one is looking at a national collection, and obviously this is a IIIF event, so this one's slightly more obvious for most of the people here. But the issue was, if you've got different institutions sharing images and content and trying to ingest them into a national collection, without a shared standard, that becomes very, very difficult. You've got different systems, different software, different protocols, different arrangements of your data, whether it's got a live link or whether it's an export. There's just a lot of work to do. And obviously moving towards IIIF streamlines that process. And it means a potential future national collection can just have a consistent single process for ingesting images and the metadata associated with them. Now, that's even more of an issue at scale, obviously. So maintaining a large number of custom metadata and image service connections and acting as a host and maintainer for custom data dumps is just not really practical. So a common solution was really required. So effectively, that's what our project was sort of trying to push forward, is that demonstrating the benefits of IIIF and how a national collection just couldn't really function. Pulling information and sharing information from a range of institutions or individual researchers or universities, galleries, libraries, archives. It just wouldn't really work without a shared standard infrastructure, IIIF for images. So our project brought together a wide range of interested parties. So our investigators included myself from the National Gallery, from the Portrait Gallery and Edinburgh University and the British Library, with a range of additional project partners from the Botanical Gardens in Edinburgh, Digerati, the V&A, Stanford Library, Science Museum and IIIF consortium itself. The project website is there if you'd like to go and have a little look. It still seems to be running, and we have lots more information there. Now, as a result of this 2-year or so project, we created a final report for the project, which is now available and can be downloaded either from the project program website or directly from Zenodo following the DOI link given there. Within the project, we conducted 7 events, contributed to 16 others. We hosted 4 surveys and reviews, engaging with over 3,000 people, which was quite successful. Our outputs from all of our webinars and seminars are all hosted on Zenodo, and they've been visited there over 1,400 times. And our videos and webinars have been viewed on YouTube more than 4,000 times. One of them, a small introduction to a question section, has been viewed 1,400 times on its own. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but we'll see. All these interactions have also led to many other discussions between project partners and external researchers, so it's been extremely fruitful. The project report itself is not all 144 pages. There are quite a few appendices and add-ons and the survey of results. So actually reading the report isn't 144 pages. So it's not quite that bad. So the aims of the project itself was to highlight and demonstrate opportunities and benefits of the IIIF standard, examine its potential for different organizations, explore the systems and tools that were available, and examine what other tools or other solutions might be needed to maximize the potential. So one of the first things that we started to look at is to develop our website. We wanted a nice flexible website that was accessible and editable by all of the project partners. And we wanted to be able to embed IIIF resources within that. And thus we started to explore with GitHub, which was mentioned before. Making use of GitHub pages and GitHub actions, we developed a system called SimpleSite, which just automatically generated formatted web pages free on GitHub system, and also allowed us to embed IIIF viewers, Mirador, OpenSeaDragon, and a few others, where people could directly share, and we could share our content reporting on the work we were doing in the project. And then you can see some screenshots from it. We had sort of blogs and questions and other things on the website for people to explore. Now, the webinars, as mentioned, we directly supported 5 different webinars, 4 directly from our project and 1 in collaboration with another Tank Foundation project on persistent identifiers. And we've had a lot of impact on these. These projects were, these workshops were originally intended to be physical events. And the number of interactions and people who managed to come and view these were massively increased by doing them digitally. So you have different interactions, obviously, with an online event versus an in-person event, but we did manage to increase our reach with our webinars quite substantially as a result of doing them online. Now, virtually connecting IIIF collections. So this is one of the things we were looking at exploring within the project. We wanted to develop a simple IIIF discovery system because obviously lots of content is becoming more available in complex APIs. And unless you're very technically savvy, it can be sometimes difficult to go through the documentation, even if the documentation is there, to actually access real IIIF content. The idea was to explore how we could make it slightly easier, and this was supported by our own project and 2 other projects as well. And effectively what we built was a simple discovery system where you had a free text search across, in this case, 9 different systems, and it returned you images. So the idea was that the automatic return was in OpenSeaDragon, so you could just see the content, but then there's the option to toggle to Mirador, where you can actually get the metadata and more detailed links back and manifest and all this sort of thing from the results. I should say that the GBIF introduction was just added last night due to some complications. That's the adding a lot of plant-based imagery and plant specimen imagery, but that was added in last night because we were waiting for updates in the GBIF system to be able to search specifically for IIIF content, but I managed to add that in last night. I have to say the system is dominated somewhat by the Smithsonian, and if you do a search for flowers you get over 3 million objects, but most of them are from the Smithsonian, but there's a lot of really nice content in there. In the project, we also, as I said, engaged in a number of surveys exploring the awareness of IIIF within the UK and European institutions and the current presentation of IIIF. So there's a lot of content in there in this short presentation. I'm not going to go through much of it at all, but it's all in the report and you can explore it. But there's very interesting things about defining exactly what using IIIF means. And it means entirely different things to different institutions. Do they have IIIF logos on their website? Are they actually using it to serve images? Do they use it internally within their institutions? So there's a lot of broad differentiation about what actually using it means. And it was quite interesting to see the results of that. So I recommend you have a little look at the report to explore those survey results. Some other things we explored in there was a IIIF Collections Explorer, trying to enable a heritage data repository and examining the need for a new IIIF manifest editor. So the Collection Explorer, the gallery's been sharing for over 10 years high resolution images in support of exhibitions and publications and research projects using a bespoke IIP image viewer. And it was high time that we updated that to encompass IIIF properly and make use of the IIIF presentation version 3. So this is what we were looking to do. So we've based it on a system of encoding all of the data about all of the exhibitions, collections, and publications that we wanted to discuss into IIIF collections and manifests. So there is no longer a database under the system. It's entirely based on IIIF documents. And that's the website for it. And effectively, it's just, we created a IIIF collection explorer just to make it slightly friendlier and prettier to work your way through a collection and then actually displaying the images themselves within Mirador directly. You can load the top level collection directly into Mirador and explore it that way as well. But as you will see, the benefits of doing it this way is we actually have links within the manifests for PDFs of articles. So the presentation actually puts the actual PDF article on one side and then supporting images on the other. And you can actually, as you're reading the publication, look at the original images that the publication was based on. Now, the other thing we were exploring is archiving. And it's quite difficult for people to archive work if you don't have a dedicated data repository. We were looking at what free opportunities were out there, particularly ones that potentially might support IIIF. And one of the ones we've explored was Zenodo, which is the catch-all data repository for the EU. And it's funded by CERN, and they've got a guarantee on it for 20 years as it's backed by their funding stream for their own research. So CERN basically generates so much data that they're quite happy to help support holding other people's data. So all of the outputs from our project have actually been embedded into Zenodo, including our webinars, our report, and all sorts of other information. And you get a DOI for them, and it makes it a lot easier to share and reference your work. So each of our webinars have a dedicated DOI like this one here that we can share and explore. Now, what we wanted to do is actually create a customized data repository, including IIIF content. Now, the existing Zenodo repository uses IIIF to generate all of its thumbnails if you upload TIFFs. And we did create something to automatically scrape the pages and generate a manifest, but it was blocked kind of because the number of downloads you hit very quickly when pulling the tiles. But we managed to have a collaboration with Data Futures, who are the organization, it's a not-for-profit organization in Germany, who are doing the IIIF development within Zenodo software, particularly within the underpinning software called Invenio RDM. There's a link for it now. And we worked with them to develop a custom data repository for Tudor portraits that allowed people to actually have IIIF previews within the pages and all of the metadata and information structure as an archival data repository for our content. So that project went very well and it's working. I did notice on Twitter that Zenodo is currently rolling out the update to Invenio RDM. So it'd be curious to see across their entire infrastructure how that improved IIIF support is actually exploited. Now, the last thing I was going to talk about is a new manifest editor. As most of you will probably know, IIIF manifests are specially formatted documents describing all of the images and their metadata and their relationships to each other and how they can be displayed. But this is quite complex to actually open up in a text editor and change and move around yourself. So we're exploring how easy could this be. One of our project partners, Digerati, had been working on a IIIF manifest editor on a GUI approach so that people could sort of drag and drop images around, move tiles around, add metadata in a much more user-friendly manner. And they've been doing a lot of good work on this, and you can explore that. But it's a client-side JavaScript application, open source under an MIT license to allow people to work with it. And it's ongoing, it's developed. Our project developed some of the initial work, and it's continuing to be developed from other funders. And it is looking very, very promising, with previews in multiple viewers and allowing you to load in existing content or trying to generate content from more foundational resources. But it's looking good. And yes, all of the documentation and information is on GitHub, and you can see all the people who've put the actual programming work in and which projects have supported it. And it looks very promising. Now, in addition to the actual practical work, we output a lot of recommendations within the project, and these have been put forward and they're beginning to be absorbed and followed by the program. So IIIF should be adopted as part of the future related research projects. So we're hoping that IIIF as a standard will just be encompassed into the work they're doing. And the programme and UKRI as a whole should support the development of IIIF in the UK infrastructure. So we're pushing for TANC, or the Towards a National Collection, to actually join IIIF consortium, but that hasn't achieved this so far. We're also looking at how they might develop a UK index of IIIF use. So some of the surveys and investigations they've been doing about technology usage within the UK have already answered some of these questions along with the surveys that we did, but we're looking at whether they could explore as part of a national collection index of who's using IIIF and how. A knowledge infrastructure was something that was pushed forward a lot as well, is that there are people who know how to use IIIF and their institutions, and there's a lot of training provided through the IIIF consortium for this, but often it's harder in a local environment to know who to talk to and who could help you with things. So we were suggesting that the development or the support of hubs of knowledge and hubs of excellence that can provide support for smaller institutions and smaller museums and galleries to examine and make use of these sorts of technologies. The other thing we wanted to look at is a lot of really good work being done in many institutions about user interfaces, but we felt that more work could be beneficial looking at user studies and evaluations. Is what do researchers need, not just what looks pretty and what the new tool will allow you to do, but what actual options have been found, what people have studied this, what information can help support or guide other people developing user interfaces and search systems in relation to IIIF. So this is the other sort of major recommendation we put forward. So they've all been accepted towards a national collection and put forward, but we're still waiting to see how many of them can be implemented directly. The report includes a bit more detail about these recommendations and breakdown of some other sort of sub recommendations as well. So I would recommend you go and have a look at the final report. And I will say thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Joe. So any questions?
I would just say that I think in relation to something Alison said, Zenodo can be extremely good for publishing outputs of projects. So if you wrap them up in a nice little package, it can be very handy to do that. We're having a number of discussions with that idea of what should be in that package. There's kind of on the hardcore digital research, the notion of a fair digital object and what should be in that little package to make it sensible. The other thing I've been exploring recently is something called Open Research Europe. And unfortunately, at the moment, it's only tied to EU research funding, but there are a publishing structure that allow you to publish different types of publications. So it's not just research articles, but you can do data set notes and software tools and blogs and a number of other things, but it's a peer-reviewed structure. You get DOIs and properly referenced information for your CVs and your academic sort of process. They're hoping they might be able to engage with national funded research programs by 2026, but the actual structure of how they do the publications looks very, very interesting. So I'm starting to have a little look at that, but that might relate to that idea of trying to have a place or a forum with which to publish some of this less novel academic research, as it were, but very practically useful work that's done.
It's partly, again, trying to, looking at that RL UK and HRC project of bridging that gap between activity that's going on in libraries and archives that's not being seen as academic outputs. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. But there is a group of people, I don't really have a name as such yet, but you can email if you want me to know. We're talking about in the UK whether a different type of publication is required for this. It's kind of the very useful grey literature, or if an organisation, we've done a new website, it's great.
Yeah.
It's not really novel, but actually they did a lot of really good work. They've got new IIIF viewers in there. There's no real place to publish that as such if it isn't new. But it would practically be very useful for other people. So that's being discussed. I think the Getty, the British Library, ourselves, and the V&A, and a few other people, we've been chatting about what could be used in that space.
Yeah, I think it's important in terms of research infrastructure, but also, we talked a bit about skills earlier in the session as well. There's kind of skill gap, and so, it's still something advertised earlier. I think it was a digital scholarship fellowship at the National Library of Scotland, maybe, and it's still very much geared towards early career researchers. There's a very small print about, equivalent experience would be welcome, but then how do you go about demonstrating that? How do you show that you have a publication record? How do you show engagement with research if you're not, already fully couched within the research ecosystems.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a project called Sparkle. We've great acronyms for them, don't we? About practice-based research, and that's been really interesting as well, because the challenges with that and when submitting for the joy that is REF, but how our repositories aren't really fit for purpose to describe those. So yeah, I'm hoping there'll be further news about that in the new year.
Great. Well, I don't really want to bring the conversation to an end, but unfortunately we're out of time. It's thank you to all the speakers that spoke today. And as I mentioned, hopefully we can do this in person next time. And yeah, thank you all. And the wider IIIF conference is going on, carrying on at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So there'll be a break now, and then hopefully see you at 3. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenn.